Hello there. I'm Windermere Real Estate's Chief Economist, Matthew Gardner, and welcome to the latest episode of Mondays with Matthew. Over the past few months, analysts like myself have been starting to get our hands on early numbers from the Census Bureau. And although we won't get the bulk of the data for another several months, I thought it would be interesting to take a quick look at some of the information that the government has put out, specifically as it relates to migration patterns. And this is actually a relevant topic given the pandemic, with many people wondering if we saw a mass shift in where we choose to live because of COVID-19. And this belief that we packed up and moved because of the pandemic is, at least at face value, quite credible, especially given that home sales in 2021 were at levels we haven't seen since 2006. But the reality, at least from the data we've received so far, actually tells a different story. This first chart looks at people and not households, and it shows that, contrary to popular belief, we're actually moving less frequently now than we've done in decades, with the share of people not moving in a single year rising from just about 84% to over 91.5%. Of course, we are having fewer children now than we did, but not to the degree that would change this trend. And when we break this down between homeowners and renters, well, there's quite the discrepancy between the two groups. Although the number of renters not moving has risen from 67.5% up to 84% since 2000, the number of homeowners staying put has moved from almost 91% all the way up to 95% last year. So the data thus far is not suggesting that we saw any form of mass exodus following the pandemic. In fact, we haven't been moving as much for the past 2 decades, but people did move since COVID-19 hit, and the reasons that they did were fascinating. The following charts are broken up into 4 categories of movers: those who moved for family reasons, those who moved for employment-related reasons, those that moved for housing-related reasons, and finally, those that moved for other reasons. So, starting with family-related reasons, while it wasn't surprising to see that the major reason for both owners and renters to move was to establish a new household, nor was it surprising to see a greater share of renters heading out on their own than did homeowners. Finally, the share of those moving because of a change in marital status was essentially the same between renters and homeowners. And when we look at employment-related reasons for people moving last year, a greater share of renters moved because of a new job than did homeowners, and more renters moved to be closer to their workplaces than did homeowners. Again, not really surprising given that a large share of renters work in service-based industries and therefore proximity to their workplaces is important. You'd also see that a greater share of homeowners than renters moved because they lost their jobs. And finally, and not at all surprisingly, far more homeowners moved because they chose to retire than did renters. And when we look at housing-related reasons that people moved, a large share of owners and renters moved from their current home or apartment and into a new, bigger and better house or apartment. A statistically significant share looked to move into a better neighbourhood too, and I do wonder whether owners were doing this because of the ability to work from home and possibly move to a better location further away from their workplaces. And even though renters tend to stay closer to their workplaces, I do wonder whether these renters weren't in white-collar industries and that the ability also to work from home has led them to move into an area that they perceive to be better suited to them. And a statistically significant share of renters moved because of the fact that rents have been skyrocketing over the past 18 months or so, and this clearly impacted some homeowners too. And under the other category, more renters than owners moved because they were either entering or exiting a relationship with a domestic partner, and more renters left to either go to college or because they had completed their degrees. Health-related reasons for moving had a significant impact on homeowners over renters. I found it particularly interesting to see a lot of owners saying that climate was the reason for their move. Of course, I can only hypothesize as to whether people are simply looking to move to a warmer climate or whether climate change is starting to have an increasingly large influence on where we choose to live. My gut tells me that climate change is becoming a far more important consideration for homeowners, although we can't deny that a lot of people, specifically on the East Coast, moved south during the pandemic. These next few charts break down movers not just by whether they are owners or renters, but also by ethnicity. And here you can see that homeowners across these three ethnicities were pretty much uniform in their desire to stay in their existing home, with only 4 to 5% of them moving. And renters who, as we've already seen, did move more frequently last year than homeowners, but were also in a very tight range of between 83 and 85%. The same can be said about Hispanic homeowners and mixed-race families, with about 95% of them not moving last year. Now, this is modestly lower than white, black, or Asian households, but the difference is very marginal. And as for renters, between 83 and almost 88% of them within these three ethnicities moved last year. But you will see that a bigger share of Hispanic renters stayed put, as opposed to all the other ethnicities shown. Looking closer now at those who did move, even though fewer Asian households moved when compared to all other ethnicities, far more left the state than stayed. And the same was true for Asian renters, with over a quarter of them moving out of state. Again, a greater share of the Hispanic homeowners who did move last year stayed in the state where their old house was, and the share of mixed households was roughly at average across all ethnicities. And the share of Hispanic and mixed-race renters who stayed in state was also about average. Now, what I see from the data is that the huge migration that many expected during COVID-19 has not been affirmed, at least not by these numbers. Now, that said, we are sure to see numerous revisions because of the issues that COVID-19 posed on census takers. So we will get a different story as updates are released. Now, what I found very interesting was the massive increase in renters moving in with their significant others. I'm actually not surprised by this, given that there are roughly 48.5 million people in the country aged between 20 and 30. This is their time. I was also fascinated by the share of the population who moved due to climate. Now, I will be doing some more digging around the darkest recesses of the Census Bureau website to see if I can find out more about this. Although I can't confirm it, my gut does tell me that climate, and specifically climate change, will be a factor of growing importance when it comes to where people choose to live in the future. And there we have it. As always, if you've got any questions or comments about this particular topic, please do reach out to me. But in the meantime, stay safe out there. I look forward to visiting with you all again next month. Bye now.